schedule so that she had Thursdays off. So while all her friends were suffering in class, she had a whole day to herself to kind of sleep in, relax, watch a show, and honestly, she was probably feeling even better. If she kept her grades, she would graduate with everyone else. So that morning, Kimberly slept in. She was still in bed when her mom, Lucy, came in to say goodbye before work. She kissed her, said I love you, and left. Since Kimberly had the day off, she had agreed to babysit for some local kids that day. So the plan was simple: come home in the evening, and the family would start planning for graduation already. Everything was going smoothly. So while Kimberly was supposed to be babysitting, her mom, Lucy, opened the check and her phone was ringing to voicemail. It was apparently Mary.
He was found by a group of young guys who were just looking for a quiet place to, well, let's just say meditate. They drove to a remote bridge known as the Galloping Goose Bridge. Instead of finding
Hey, babe, can I have this way? Okay, come on.
the discovery was in such a state that at first it was impossible to even tell what it was. But when the police arrived and compared the records, the worst was confirmed. It was Kimberly. One thing was immediately clear. This was not an accident. It was obvious what had happened. And here, folks, I have to warn you that the next part is very, very difficult. So, the final report. Despite the condition of the discovery, it was not hard for the experts to determine the sequence of events. The details of what was done to her are so disturbing that I cannot and will not share them here, out of respect for her and for platform policies. And you know what is weirdest? Usually the police hide such horrific details, but Kimberly's parents insisted. They fought for all these details to be made public. They wanted the world to know what happened to
Good
their
boy,
daughter,
Papa. You hungry?
so that everyone would understand that this was not just done by a criminal. This was done by a true monster.
There is no comparison. This was the facts in this case disturbed very deeply the most seasoned homicide investigators that we have in this problem.
And of course, once the news spread about what happened to Kimberly, everyone was in shock. You know how it is in small towns. First the shock, then the grief, and then the gossip starts. What is interesting is not everyone reacted like a normal person. You see, Kimberly had a friend named Samantha Kennedy. She, like any normal person, was just devastated, shattered. She could not talk about it. But Kimberly had another friend, a 16-year-old guy that she was well with. And he folks was the key character in that whole thing. It was interesting that he was one of those friends Kimberly had left over from her ex-boyfriend Zach, and he had was very supportive of her after the breakup, kind of knight in shining armor. So after Kimberly was gone, Samantha and Cruz reacted to it. Well, let's just say Samantha was in so much pain she could not even hear her name. Cruz, on the other hand, could not shut up about her. Siri. Found a way to bring her back to Kimberly and what happened. So one day Samantha goes up to Kimberly.
Eat, papas. Come on. Eat. Eat, papas. Eat.
Who knows? But then another friend overhears who say a different thing. Who cannot explain what he said he was glad she was gone. He hated her. Okay, hold on. What the heck? Is this the same good friend who helped her get through the breakup? Who was there for her? The one who said she was gone? Social media, looking at who liked his photos, what he commented on. In short, they were already watching him pretty closely. And here, another interesting detail comes out that basically puts everything in its place. Around the time of Kimberly's disappearance, Cruz attacked his own mother. Yes, you heard that right. And what does he do as soon as he is out? That is right. He goes to Kimberly's memorial service to pay his respects. Even though just yesterday he was telling everyone how glad he was that she was gone and how much he hated her, the level of audacity is God tier. But the wildest part is how he acted after the service. They say he was literally skipping to his car, like he was some kind of, I do not know, fairy tale character playing in a meadow after a successful day. In short, completely unhinged. So the detectives decided it was time to bring in the heavy artillery and got a warrant for all his digital records. They needed to see everything. His text messages, his browser history, everything that was not available to the public. When the police started looking into it, they realized Cruz was just obsessed. He read every news story and every update, every new fact. He immediately forwarded to one person. That person was 17-year-old Cameron Moffett, or just Cam. And who is this Cam? It turns out he was also from that same group of Zach's friends, and it also turned out, had a crush on Kimberly. As soon as she broke up with Zach, he immediately, without wasting any time, asked her out.
And right here, folks, is where that same high school drama starts that just makes you roll your eyes. Because Kimberly, instead of moving on, was still hung up on her ex. She apparently decided the best way to forget him was to make him jealous. You know, the classic teen show playbook that never works. And she, as a true hero, set her sights not on Cam, who had confessed his feelings for her, but on Cruz. Why? Because he was a close friend of Zach. Logic? Well, do not look for it here. And although all her friends told her it was a bad idea and not to do it, she did not listen to them. And what about Cam? Instead of giving him a yes or no, she just sent him emojis, keeping him on the hook just in case. Oh, thanks, and an emoji. Like she did not turn him down, but did not agree either. I will just say that I do not approve of Kimberly trying to pit these guys against each other. It was not the best way to handle the situation. But she was a teenager going through a breakup. Who among us has not done stupid things at that age? This in no way justifies what happened next. Because the real danger here was not high school drama. It was a much darker thing. It turns out Cruz and Cam shared a common and, let's just say, unhealthy obsession. And as a cherry on top, Cruz's father was a convicted killer. I am not saying that the children of killers always become killers. But you have to agree that is a red flag the size of Texas. And Cruz himself, it seems, was following in his father's footsteps. He started getting into trouble and not just, forgot to do his homework. No, first it was the classic stuff. You know the classic for a teenage rebel, nothing special. But then it gets more serious. theft. And not just candy from a store. No, he was stealing paychecks, stealing money from people's mailboxes. That, excuse me, is full-on mail fraud. A level a little higher than just a troubled teen, right? And this was all I remind you before he even turned 16. Then, when that was probably not enough for him, he moved on to a new level. Arson. Just taking and destroying other people's property. Well, because why not? In short, the dude was clearly on an upward criminal career path. And you know, arson is a classic red flag. It is like the trailer to a very bad movie. You already know it is not going to end well. And Cruz, it seems, was following a classic script. He did not just set fires. He also, as we remember, escalated the situation because he managed to attack his own mother. But what was even more disturbing was that Cruz seemed to be strangely obsessed with the idea of these terrible acts. He wrote blog posts about serial killers. In these posts, he even joked that he thought he could be a serial killer too. And you know that by itself could be written off as a typical teenager trying to seem cool and mysterious. You know, the emo phase, black nail polish, and all that. But writing a blog about these acts, being the son of a convicted killer, and having your own legal problems, that is not just a recipe for disaster. That is the finished dish just waiting to be served. And what about Cam? Well, he, like Kimberly, went to that same alternative school because of his ADHD. But as it turned out, ADHD was the least of his problems. He had experienced a horrific trauma in his childhood when he was only 4 years old. After that, he just could not cope with it. He repeatedly tried to escape from his bedroom window. And what do parents do when they see their child trying to escape their own personal hell? That is right, they put bars on the windows. Because if a child is trying to run away, the best solution is to turn their room into a prison. Flawless logic, right? And of course, after all this, he was angry at the whole world, especially at the adults who could not protect him. He had aggression problems. He even got into trouble for bringing a weapon to school. And so, like in some bad movie, these two heroes find each other. Cam, with all his rage at the world, meets Cruz, the son of a killer. And you know, they felt this connection. Cam finally met someone who gets him. And this person did not just not judge him. This person was the same. So from that time on, they became best friends. And they, of course, egged each other on, constantly talking about their dark fascinations. More precisely, they just constantly talked about these terrible acts.
And all this, folks, the police knew
Main
even before they got access to their
ingredients.
phones. This was all
Water,
public information,
red
rumors,
pepper,
things they
salt,
posted online themselves.
Spices.
But when the cops finally got a warrant and got into their
Spices.
phones and computers, well, here, folks, you better buckle up
Spices.
because everything before this
Garlic,
was just the beginning. It turns out
acetic
they both
acid,
really like to watch, let's just say, very
Xan-
specific adult content. They even sometimes watched it
Xan-
together. It
is that
seems at some
Xanax?
point just watching was not enough for
Xanthan?
them. They wanted to make it all a reality.
Oh,
Basically, the
xanthan
same thing that
gum,
happened to Kimberly.
sodium,
And unfortunately, she was not the first person
bentonite
they tried to act out these fantasies with. It turned out that Cam
as
already
a
had a history of
preservative.
mistreating his ex-girlfriends. And here we come back to Kimberly. And,
This
you know,
is somebody
considering all
really
this,
kept
you
you
could
out
say
for
she was
some reason. I
lucky
don't
she
know
did not
how,
agree to go
but
on a date with Cam. But as we remember,
just
she did not
isn't.
exactly turn him down either. She was
District
keeping him on the
Boulevard,
hook.
Vernon, California.
And
What the
one
fuck is
day,
she from
Cam
Mexico?
sent
I
Kimberly
don't
a
know what this
message.
shit.
He wrote that he wanted to give her a, get this, a lollipop
Like
with a
una
cream
salsa?
filling that he was holding in his pants.
It's not
First
sauce,
of all,
it's
who the
hot
heck talks
sauce.
like
The
that?
fuck?
Seriously, where did he even hear a term like that?
Dude.
I have heard some weird stuff, but a lollipop with a
shit.
cream filling, is that some kind of secret code for future inmates? And what does Kimberly do after getting such a, you know, romantic
Spices.
message? She takes it and forwards it to Cruz. And Cruz, the great guy that he is, replies, "You know, I have lollipops of that brand too, just a club of anonymous confectioners or something." And you know, I cannot read these messages without thinking about what happened next, because the coroner's report on Kimberly stated that a horrific act was committed against her with an object. Remember? So it turns out when
I
these
don't
two were
know.
writing to her about their lollipops, it was not just some stupid, disgusting pickup line. It was like they were telling her exactly what they were planning to do to her. It was the trailer for their own horror movie. But that is not all. The day before it all happened, Cruz wrote to Kimberly again. And although I cannot verify this, there were rumors that it was a response to her sad post about her rabbit's death. I do not know if that is true, but the text itself is a little strange. And you know what, folks? I am not going to read it to you because it is long and it is confusing who said what.
Oh, what do you want?
What are you doing tomorrow?
Nothing other than babysitting at 3.
I'm bored and was looking for someone to chill with today. I also wanted to apologize.
Yo,
I have some things I'd rather tell you in person about the entire Zach fiasco.
this is sudden, and I can't help but wonder why. I don't want to talk about Zach.
Zach and I aren't as close as we used to be, but I feel you deserve an explanation.
Don't worry, it's not much.
It's more about why Cam and me and everyone was so mean.
Whatever happened to Kim, you deserve nothing. I kill your rabbit. Haha.
That's what I wanted to talk about.
I gotta say, when I saw her text, I was shocked and confused.
But like I said, I'd rather talk in person. I can meet you tomorrow earlier than babysitting and talk about it over a couple bowls.
Sure.
So what does Cruz do?
right now.
Guys, we've been on a 3-week road trip through the US, and guess how we paid for it? Using a future-proof method called Airbnb
Hey,
co-listing.
what's
And here's
up?
the craziest part. It didn't involve renting or owning any property. Here's how it works.
Watching YouTube
Step
videos.
number 1, go to Craigslist for your local market and click on the housing category. Step
I'm
number 2, click
interested.
on this button to see the oldest listings for rent. Step number 3, find a property that's been sitting empty for at least
Like,
20 days or
people say.
longer, because that means that the landlord is losing money and needs your help. Step number 4, copy the address, paste it into the Airbnb Analyzer app, and click this big blue button. The Airbnb Analyzer app shows that this property could potentially generate 2.3 times the long-term rental rate. Now, using the method I just showed you, let me show you one of my Airbnb profiles. There's 13 of my listings, as you can see right here. Here's an example of one of those listings, and here's the receipts. This is how much I made last month. Now, for transparency, I'm gonna hit refresh. Here we go. This is how much I made this month. This is how much I made last month. Now, here's the best part. I've got over 24 properties on Airbnb.
I'm chilling. Nikola Tesla. Hey, and I'm in the bed. Hey, you're so cute, Blue. You're so cute. You're a good boy. Come here. Come here. I said, come over here. Don't tell me no. What? What, Babas? What? Ow! Hey, I said not in the bed. That's gross. Hey, stop licking your butthole on the bed, fool. It's
That I
gross.
don't rent, that I don't own,
I said no.
never visited before.
Go down. Hey,
and it's
go down there if you want to do that.
from my couch.
Hey.
I'm not the only one that's making this work. Let me take you to my Facebook group, show you this is legit, and show you that.
Ow, it's my finger.
Over here, you have Javon. He's
You wanna
in
try?
Arizona.
Want to try?
Over here, you have John Marco. He's in Florida. That's what he's
What?
kidnapped him at gunpoint and forced him into sex work.
Records backing up the victim's story, and he's sharing only on 14. ABC News of Jones's live at the Harris County Jail, detailing those 6 days of terror.
Damn, what a terror it was. So far, the only charges are aggravated kidnapping, but this man said in reality, he was really the victim of sex trafficking. Masterminded, he says, by a woman who called herself Cookie, operating out of a North Harris County motel.
It was really ghetto. It was scary.
A young man who still shudders when he thinks about all he endured. For almost a week, he says he was held captive in a room at the Regency Inn on Cypress Station near FM 1960. Forced, he says, to have sex for money. For blurring his face to protect his privacy.
There was a lot of crackheads. A lot of a lot of sketchy homeless people.
Wow.
A life, he says, he never imagined for himself. While the Harris County Sheriff's Office says he was sucked in
make some money because I didn't have a job.
Once here, he says he was introduced to this woman, Herbert Forrest. Although when they met, he says she went by a different name.
Her name was Cookie.
Cookie, he says, quickly set about signing him up for an escort site and told him he had to have sex with men for money. Hey, he says he saw an opportunity to escape and return home.
Good shit.
2 hours later, deputies say a doorbell camera shows Pena and Forrest at the victim's front door.
Oh,
This time with an armed man. Investigators say they and Nixon Simmons forced him into a car at gunpoint.
Cookie started beating me, and she was like, "Don't ever leave again. Like, if I ever leave, like, she'll blow my brains out."
For the next 6 days, he says he was beaten, plied with drugs, and deprived of food. At night, he says he was expected to solicit men in this Ross
That's
parking lot.
nasty.
Although he says he only ever slept with one.
I knew that if I made them money, they would keep making me work for them. They would keep me around. So I just tried not to sleep with anybody.
Even so, he says the experience left him drained. At one point, hoping Forrest would make good on an earlier threat.
Like a couple days in,
Sorry.
I wanted her to kill me. I told her to kill me. Like, just get it over with.
In the end, he says it was his arm that saved him. October 24th, he says he was able to text her using a phone he'd hidden from his captors, and that she picked him up during one of those nights out in the Ross parking lot.
I was like, "Yo, this is not
And it turns out he wasn't the only one forced to do this. One of the suspects, Edward Pena, also beat him and made the water.
Like usual.
Right now, they're still under
Yeah.
investigation. I'm Dr. Andrew Jones, ABC 13, Eyewitness News.
Ding. Whoop, there it is. And he said, whoop, there it is. Dang, no more table. That's bad.
That sort of thing.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Or if this is your first visit, welcome.
Okay, here's a crazy story for you. And of course, it happened in Florida, right? In January 2019, a quiet community in Chilliwack, Florida woke up to a nightmare. 3 members of the Amato family were found shot to death in their home. The victims were
Novin was just 18, a high school student walking home one afternoon in Bogor, Indonesia.
A quiet alley and a familiar shortcut. One she took almost every day, back and forth from school. The kind that we too take regularly, just walking and getting lost in our thoughts. But that afternoon was different. There was evil, the kind that descended upon her and left us all with nothing but questions. Because Novin was senselessly and brutally murdered on the very steps of that familiar alleyway.
That's me.
Just a short distance from her home, she had been stabbed and left bleeding. A young woman, robbed of her bright future, a grieving family and friends, and a community asking why. Sleepy wisely. A few days before it happened, some of her friends got this weird chain message. Depending on how old you are, you might remember getting those chain messages, usually through email or text. They always started the same way, a warning, something like, "Don't ignore this message," followed by a threat that if you did, something bad would happen to you or to someone you love. Then came the instructions. Forward this to 10 people, send it within 5 minutes, that sort of thing. It was meant to guilt you into keeping the chain alive, to pass it on so you wouldn't break it. Over time, people stopped taking them seriously. The novelty wore off, and what once felt eerie just became spam. Most of those messages died quietly in unread inboxes. But then, one of them did not, because this one was different. Because this one warned that a murder was going to happen. It did not say who, it did not say where or when, just that it would happen, and it would happen soon. And when people heard what happened to Novin, it did not feel like just another coincidence. it felt real. People were terrified. Yet, 6 years later, her case is still unsolved. And honestly, this is one of the strangest cases I have ever come across. This is the unsolved case of Adriana Jubilia Noven-Chaya. Most people just called her Noven. She was born on November 30th, 2000 in Semayang, a small, quiet area on the outskirts of Bandung in Indonesia. Her family was not wealthy, but they were close, and they looked after each other. She was the eldest sibling in the family, and her parents described her as a creative soul, always sketching, making things, and dreaming about the future. From a young age, she wanted to be a fashion designer, to open her own boutique. She even wanted to study abroad in Germany, and she was already learning the language, just in case the opportunity ever came. To follow her dream, she enrolled in a vocational high school in Bulgar, majoring in fashion design. She lived alone in a small boarding house near the school, far from home, but it helped her focus on her studies. Her teachers said she was the kind of student you notice right away, polite, driven, and creative, and her friends remember her as someone who always lifted others up.
That look looks like me. It's the 7 wealthy California women that are on TV right now. The crimes in the movie. One of them now looks like me looking.
Case number 1,
Hello,
Rebecca
Para.
Grossman.
Judge has sentenced socialite Rebecca Grossman to 15 years to life in the hit-and-run crash that killed 2 young brothers in Westlake Village back in 2020.
She was known as a socialite in Los Angeles, the kind of woman who appeared at charity fundraisers, co-founded a foundation for children's burn victims, and lived in luxury neighborhoods where wealth and influence were the norm. But on one September evening in 2020, Rebecca Grossman made choices that would destroy her reputation, her freedom, and 2 young lives. It was September 29th, 2020, in Westlake Village, one of those quiet, upscale suburbs where families feel safe. That evening, Nancy Iskander was crossing a marked crosswalk with her 3 sons. 11-year-old Mark held the hand of his 8-year-old brother Jacob. Just a few steps behind, their mother pushed their youngest in a stroller. Then, out of nowhere, came a white Mercedes-Benz SUV. Witnesses described it as flying down the road, fast, unrelenting, and far above the 45 miles per hour speed limit. In reality, the SUV was traveling more than 80 miles per hour. It struck the boys with catastrophic force. Mark's body was thrown over 250 feet. Jacob's was hurled nearly 50. Their mother could only watch in horror as her 2 children were taken in an instant. Behind the wheel was Rebecca Grossman. She wasn't just speeding. Prosecutors later revealed she was tailing her then-lover, former MLB pitcher Scott Erickson, racing recklessly down the street. And investigators discovered she wasn't sober. Grossman had both alcohol and Valium in her system. Instead of stopping, Grossman kept going. Her vehicle only came to a halt when its emergency system forced it to stop. But by then, it was already too late. At first, she tried to explain it away. She told investigators she didn't see the children. She suggested another car might have hit them. She even tried to shift blame
I think
toward
it was
Erickson.
another car.
But the evidence
That was
told
the
the
car
colder
behind me.
truth. The SUV's black box data revealed her speed. Surveillance cameras captured her route. Cell tower pings placed her at the scene. Her story collapsed under the weight of technology and testimony. Even worse, prosecutors accused her of showing little genuine remorse. Instead of fully accepting responsibility, she fought the charges with excuses, painting herself as a victim of circumstance. On February 23, 2024, a jury found Rebecca Grossman guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder, 2 counts of vehicular manslaughter, and hit-and-run causing death. She was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison, plus 3 additional years for fleeing the scene. Inside the courtroom, Nancy Iskander, the boy's mother, gave a statement that silenced everyone. "You didn't just kill my children. You tried to erase them with lies." Today, Rebecca Grossman is no longer a philanthropist or socialite. She is inmate number WLF 932, serving her sentence behind bars. A woman who once flaunted wealth and status now faces the
Ew, you're
possibility of
pressing.
parole in about 9
What the fuck?
years, a fact that continues to torment the
Why is it
families
so
she
fishy?
devastated. From charity galas to
Fishy.
prison walls, her story
Ugh.
is a reminder that money and privilege can't erase
Ugh.
recklessness, nor can they bring back 2 boys whose lives were
Not
cut
anymore.
short. Case number 2, Amy Priesmeyer.
Does that come to you every once in a while? The nightmare, the dreams?
It does. Not in nightmares or dreams, but it's there. It's not something I can erase. It's something I don't like to think about. But there's also a part of it that I don't want to forget what I've done either. I can't make it go away, and I don't feel it would be right to make it go away.
In the late 1990s, Lancaster, California was the kind of community where neighbors waved to each other and young couples dreamed about starting families.
Just the girl that
That
looks
was
like
the
looks
life
like me.
Ricky Cowles Jr. thought he was building. At just 21, Ricky was an electrician, hardworking, quiet, and dependable. He was also about to become a father. His 16-year-old girlfriend, Amy Priesmeyer, was pregnant with their child. To Ricky, this was the start of a family. To Amy, it was the beginning of something she wanted to escape. On August 12, 1997, Ricky was found in his apartment, brutally beaten with a claw hammer and then shot in the head. The injuries were catastrophic. He was rushed to the hospital, but he never regained consciousness. 3 days later, he died. The person who dialed 911? Amy herself. She cried, trembled, and told police she had just discovered the horrific scene. Detectives were baffled. There was no forced entry, nothing stolen, no sign of enemies. Just a young man murdered in his own home for
Yeah.
reasons no one could explain.
There's like a fly and it's just sitting here on the screen.
Then came a break.
It hasn't moved for like the last 10 minutes. I think that's weird. Don't they like fly?
And eventually,
Is it
word
fly?
reached the police.
Look.
When investigators confronted him,
Just post. It's just posted. She's moving in the room. Yeah.
The plan was more elaborate than anyone had imagined. According to Hoffman, Amy recruited her friend Jennifer Kellogg and another accomplice to help with the weapon and logistics. Amy had made sure Ricky would be home that night. Unsuspecting, Hoffman attacked him with the hammer, then pulled the trigger at point-blank range. Hours later, Amy arrived at the scene, playing the role of the devastated girlfriend. For years, her act worked. She grieved in public, raised their child, and carried on with life as if she hadn't masterminded the entire crime. But the truth always finds cracks.
Do you want to know where to invest $1,000 right now? Well, forget about AI, quantum computing, electric vehicles, cryptocurrencies, or robotics. Little known technology is projected to become roughly 10 times bigger than all of these technologies combined. The World Economic Forum says that it's arguably the most exciting human discovery since biking. And billionaire entrepreneur
Hoffman eventually testified that Amy promised him thousands of dollars for the murder. Investigators gathered secret jailhouse recordings and even caught Amy on tape saying, "If Hoffman doesn't testify, they don't have an expletive case against me." That one line revealed everything about her mindset: confident, calculating, and cold. In 2008, after more than a decade of deception, Amy Priesmeyer was convicted of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and solicitation to commit murder. The sentence? Life in prison without parole. The most heartbreaking part isn't just Ricky's death, it's what came after. The child Amy was carrying, Ricky's child, grew up without a father. Not because of an accident, not because of illness, but because his own mother orchestrated his father's murder before he was even born. Today, Amy serves her sentence at the Central California Women's Facility. Her parole hearing is scheduled for 2025, but given the cold nature of the crime, release seems almost unthinkable. For Ricky's family, her betrayal remains the deepest wound, a reminder that sometimes the greatest danger comes not from strangers, but from the person you trust most. Case number 3, Leslie Van Houten.
Leslie Van Houten will stay in prison after California Governor Gavin Newsom overruled parole. This is the second time Governor Newsom has blocked her release. Previously, former Governor Jerry Brown also rejected parole for her twice.
In 1969, Los Angeles was gripped by fear. Just one night after the infamous Tate murders that shocked Hollywood, another home would become a blood-soaked crime scene. At the center of it all was a 19-year-old girl who had once been a high school cheerleader, described as polite, soft-spoken, and full of potential. Her name was Leslie Van Houten, and she was about to become one of the most notorious women in California's history. On the night of August 10th, 1969, Van Houten, under the direction of Charles Manson, and alongside fellow cult members Tex Watson and Patricia Krenwinkel, entered the home of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca. The couple were ordinary people, kind, hardworking, and known for running a small supermarket in Los Angeles. They had no idea strangers were watching them, no idea their names had been plucked at random to fuel Manson's vision of chaos. Inside the house, Leno was tied up in the living room. Rosemary was dragged into the bedroom. What happened next was ritualistic, brutal, and senseless. Tex Watson stabbed Leno repeatedly. Rosemary fought for her life as Van Houten and Krenwinkel held her down. At one point, Tex handed Van Houten a knife and ordered her to finish the job. Leslie obeyed. She later admitted she stabbed Rosemary LaBianca at least 14 times. At trial, Van Houten would claim Rosemary was already dead when she delivered those blows. The autopsy proved otherwise. Rosemary had been alive, struggling until the end. The murders weren't just violent, they were symbols of Manson's delusion, what he called helter-skelter, a race war he believed he could ignite through terror. And Leslie Van Houten, intoxicated by drugs, groupthink, and blind loyalty, went along with it. When she and the other women were arrested, the world was stunned. In court, Van Houten and the Manson girls laughed, sang songs, and even carved X's into their foreheads to mimic their leader. America watched in horror, trying to reconcile the face of an ordinary teenager with the savagery of the crime she committed. In 1971, sentenced to death. But when California struck down the death penalty, her sentence was reduced to life in prison. For decades, she remained behind bars, a model inmate. She earned a college degree, tutored other prisoners, and participated in therapy. Over time, she expressed deep remorse, admitting she had been manipulated but refusing to shift full blame onto Manson. "I was weak," she told a parole board. "I was a coward. People died because of it." For more than 50 years, governors denied her release, insisting the crime was simply too horrific. But on July 11th, 2023, Leslie Van Houten walked free after serving 53 years. At 73 years old, she was granted parole, becoming the first Manson family member ever released from prison. For some, it was proof of redemption. For others, a betrayal. As Sharon Tate's sister Deborah put it, "She may look like a grandmother now, but I still see the girl with the knife." And that's the chilling question Leslie Van Houten's story leaves behind. Can someone who committed something so monstrous ever truly be forgiven? Case number 4, Monica Cementilli. On January 23rd, 2017, the quiet neighborhood of Woodland Hills, California, was shattered by a brutal crime. Fabio Cementilli, a well-known celebrity hairstylist who had built his reputation working with Hollywood stars, was found stabbed to death on the patio of his own home. He had been attacked viciously, stabbed 7 times, his throat slashed, arteries severed. The man who had styled red carpets and inspired young professionals in his industry was left to die outside the house where he raised his family. At first, police thought it might have been a burglary gone wrong. The scene seemed staged, valuables left behind, an open space suggesting intruders. But experienced investigators quickly noticed the inconsistencies. There were no signs of forced entry. Even more suspicious, security footage from the home had been deliberately erased. Whoever had killed Fabio wasn't a random intruder. This was someone with access. The trail led back inside his own home, to his wife, Monica Cementilli. On the surface, Monica looked like the perfect suburban wife. A mother, a partner to a...
Watch what magnesium does to your bowels.
If you have to wipe more than 4 times after you poop, here's why.
The Mayo Clinic confirms that stuck poop can cause these...
To a successful man and a woman who had it all. But behind closed doors, she was carrying on an affair with Robert Baker, a former adult film actor with a history of violence and a reputation for trouble. Together, they hatched a cold plan: kill Fabio and cash in on his $1.6 million life insurance policy. According to prosecutors, Monica played a crucial role. She left the door unlocked that day, fully aware of what would happen next. Robert Baker arrived with an accomplice, Christopher Austin, and together they carried out the savage attack. Hours later, Monica dialed 911, playing the role of the devastated wife who had just found her husband's body. But the evidence was overwhelming. DNA at the crime scene, cell phone records placing Baker and Austin near the home, the deleted surveillance tapes, and perhaps most damning text messages between Monica and her lover that exposed the entire conspiracy. When Austin decided to cooperate with police, the truth unraveled completely. He testified how Monica had orchestrated the plot, encouraging Baker to kill her husband and luring Fabio into the perfect trap. At trial, Monica showed almost no emotion, even when her own daughter Isabella looked her in the eyes and said, "You ruined our lives." In 2023, Baker and Austin were both sentenced to life in prison without parole. In April 2025, after a 10-week trial, Monica Cementilli herself was found guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances and conspiracy to commit murder. She now faces life behind bars with no possibility of parole. The tragedy of this case is not just the murder itself, but the betrayal at its core. Fabio was loyal, devoted, and loving, a man who built something beautiful for his family. And the person he trusted most in the world was secretly plotting his death. It's a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous betrayal doesn't come from strangers, but from the person sleeping beside you. Case number 5, Kristen Rossum.
Open the door to get her a new trial.
New at 5, 10 News reporter Steve Fiorina joins us with what those attorneys hope new blood sample tests will find.
On the surface, Kristen Rossum seemed to have everything. At just 24 years old, she worked as a toxicologist for the San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office, a position that demanded intelligence, precision, and professionalism. She was young, beautiful, and married to a man who adored her. Together with her husband, Greg de Villers, she lived in a comfortable apartment with what looked like a promising future. But appearances can be deceiving. Behind the professional image and the marriage, Kristen was hiding secrets. She had rekindled a methamphetamine addiction, and she was having an affair with her married supervisor, Dr. Michael Robertson. When Greg discovered both the drug use and the affair, he confronted her. He threatened to expose her addiction to her employer, which could have destroyed her career and reputation. And that confrontation sealed his fate. On November 6, 2000, Kristen dialed 911. She claimed her husband had taken his own life. When paramedics arrived, they found Greg lying lifeless on the bed. But there was something unusual about the scene. His body was surrounded by carefully scattered red rose petals. It looked staged, theatrical, not like any suicide seasoned investigators had seen before. Kristen insisted Greg had been depressed and overdosed on prescription medications, but toxicology tests told a different story. Greg's body contained lethal levels of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid many times stronger than morphine. And the combination of drugs in his system wasn't consistent with suicide. It was consistent with deliberate poisoning. The evidence mounted. Investigators discovered that vials of fentanyl were missing from Kristen's workplace lab. They found a receipt showing she had purchased a single red rose that very day, the same petals found on Greg's body. And perhaps most damning, the medical examiner's office determined Greg had a needle mark that couldn't be explained by medical treatment. Prosecutors painted the picture clearly. Kristen Rossum had murdered her husband using her knowledge of toxicology, staging the scene to mimic the famous movie American Beauty with rose petals as a grotesque cover-up. Her motive? To keep her affair hidden, avoid exposure, and free herself from a marriage she no longer wanted. At her 2002 trial, Kristen showed little remorse. Her defense argued Greg had killed himself after learning of her infidelity, but the science was undeniable. The fentanyl dose alone was enough to kill him, and only someone with access and expertise could have administered it. The jury convicted her of first-degree murder with special circumstances, murder by poison. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Today, Kristen serves that sentence at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. Every appeal has failed. A civil court later awarded $10 million to Greg's family, but no amount of money can replace what was lost. Greg was only 29 years old. He believed in his marriage. He trusted his wife. And when he tried to save her from the secrets destroying her life, she silenced him forever. A woman with beauty, brains, and opportunity, who chose deception, betrayal, and poison instead. Case number 6, Angelina Rodriguez. Some cases are chilling not just because of the crime itself, but because of the cold calculation behind them. That was the story of Angelina Rodriguez, a California woman who used marriage as a weapon, turning love and trust into opportunities for profit.
Yeah.
It was September 9th, 2000, in Montebello, California, when 41-year-old Jose...
When I missed 3 new holiday movies because of cookie decorating duty, I didn't get mad. I got friendly.
When my wife insisted we needed another streaming service so she could watch all of her Christmas movies, I didn't get mad. I got...
Jose Francisco Frank Rodriguez suddenly collapsed and died inside his home. At first glance, there were no obvious signs of foul play. No wounds, no forced entry, no struggle. His wife of just 4 months, Angelina, told investigators it was sudden, unexpected, maybe a heart attack. But questions arose almost immediately. Why would a healthy man in his early 40s drop dead without warning? And why was his new wife so quick to inquire about life insurance payouts just days after his funeral? Detectives dug deeper. They discovered that Angelina had convinced Frank to take out a $250,000 life insurance policy, naming her as the sole beneficiary. The timing was suspicious. The policy had been finalized only months before his death. Toxicology testing later revealed the truth. Frank hadn't died naturally. He had been poisoned. His system contained ethylene glycol, the main ingredient in antifreeze, along with evidence of oleander exposure, a deadly plant toxin. Investigators believed Angelina had been slowly poisoning her husband by contaminating his food and drinks. Prosecutors alleged she had even tried other methods before resorting to poison, including tampering with gas lines in the garage in what may have been an attempt to cause an explosion. The more they uncovered, the more sinister the pattern became. Then came the most disturbing revelation of all. Investigators looking into Angelina's past discovered that in 1993, 7 years before Frank's death, her 13-month-old daughter, Alicia, had died under suspicious circumstances. The case had been ruled an accident. A pacifier supposedly caused her to choke. But after Frank's murder, authorities began to suspect a darker truth, that Angelina had profited from a life insurance payout then too. In 2003, a jury found Angelina Rodriguez guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances, murder for financial gain, and murder by poison. She was sentenced to death in 2004, one of the rare women to be placed on California's death row. The judge at sentencing did not mince words. "In 20 years, I have never seen a colder heart," he said. But as with many capital cases, years of appeals followed. In 2024, her sentence was reduced to life without the possibility of parole due to procedural issues in her trial, though her guilt was never overturned. Today, Angelina serves her sentence at the Central California Women's Facility, the same prison that houses Kristen Rossum. For many, her case represents the ultimate betrayal, not just murder for money, but the exploitation of the most sacred bonds of family. A husband who thought he found love, a child who never got to grow up. In both cases, Angelina Rodriguez stood to benefit, and that fact alone is what makes her story one of the most haunting in California's history. Case number 7, Kelsey Turner.
And Jim, we know arrest warrants have been issued for 2 more suspects. That tells us that detectives do not believe Kelsey Turner acted alone. We're told one of those arrest warrants has been issued for Turner's boyfriend.
Some crimes sting more because they blur the line between generosity and exploitation. That was the story of Kelsey Turner, a playboy and Maxim model whose beauty masked a life built on manipulation, betrayal, and ultimately murder. For years, Turner lived a glamorous lifestyle in California and Las Vegas. Her Instagram showed designer clothes, luxury cars, and high-end apartments. But what her followers didn't see was that much of it was being funded by one man, Dr. Thomas Kirk Burchard, a 71-year-old psychiatrist from California. Over the course of their relationship, he spent more than $300,000 supporting her. He paid her rent, bought her cars, and covered her bills. To him, she was someone he was helping. To her, he was the key to keeping up appearances. But in early 2019, Burchard discovered forged checks, missing money, and irregularities in their financial arrangement. He decided it was time to cut Kelsey off. On March 1st, he traveled to Las Vegas to confront her, a confrontation that would be his last. Days later, his body was discovered in the trunk of Turner's blue Mercedes, abandoned in the Nevada desert near Lake Mead. He had been wrapped in blankets, but the condition of his body told a horrifying story. His head was crushed from repeated blows with a baseball bat. His face was unrecognizable. The investigation quickly pointed to Turner. Police searched the Las Vegas home she shared with her boyfriend, John Logan Kennison, and roommate Diana Pena. Inside, they found bloodstains, broken furniture, and cleaning supplies, clear signs of a violent struggle and attempted cover-up. The most chilling detail came from Pena, who cooperated with investigators. She revealed that Burchard had told Kelsey he was pulling the financial plug. Turner snapped. Pena said Kennison attacked the elderly doctor with a bat while Turner stood by, refusing to call for help, refusing to let Pena intervene. Instead, Turner helped clean up the scene and assisted in moving Burchard's body to the car trunk, where it was later dumped. The motive was simple: money. Turner wasn't willing to lose her benefactor. Instead, she allowed violence to silence him forever. In 2022, Kelsey Turner entered an Alford plea, a legal mechanism where a defendant doesn't admit guilt, but acknowledges prosecutors have enough evidence to convict. She was sentenced to 10 to 25 years in prison. Her boyfriend Kennison received a longer term, while Pena struck a deal for a lighter sentence after testifying. Turner will be eligible for parole in 2029. By then, she'll be...
Say goodbye to your reading glasses, computer glasses, and even your sunglasses. Introducing the last pair of glasses you'll ever need, featuring revolutionary...
She'll be in her late 30s, far from the glamour and photo shoots that once defined her. For Dr. Burchard's loved ones, the pain goes deeper than just his murder. They saw a man who genuinely believed he was helping someone, only to be betrayed in the most violent way imaginable. A trusted mentor, a generous soul, beaten and discarded when he no longer served his purpose. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest danger comes not from strangers, but from the people we choose to trust. 7 women, 7 lives of privilege that turned into cautionary tales. From socialites and models to wives and professionals, each of them once stood in places of comfort, stability, even admiration. Yet each chose decisions that led to betrayal, destruction, and life behind bars. What unites these stories isn't just the crimes themselves, it's the themes of trust and betrayal. Rebecca Grossman's reckless speeding shattered a family. Amy Priesmeyer's jealousy left a child fatherless before he was even born. Leslie Van Houten's blind loyalty turned her into a killer under Manson's command. Monica Sementili conspired against the man who loved her most. Kristen Rossum turned her toxicology training into a weapon against her own husband. Angelina Rodriguez used poison for profit, even as questions lingered about her child's death. And Kelsey Turner let greed destroy the man who had funded her life. All of them prove one haunting truth: wealth does not erase motive, and privilege does not guarantee morality. Behind the designer clothes, the charity galas, the professional titles, and the picture-perfect lives were cracks. Cracks filled with lust, greed, manipulation, or cold calculation. For their victims, the damage can never be undone. Families destroyed, children left behind, communities scarred. And for the women themselves, the walls of California's prisons are now their reality, no matter how glamorous their pasts once seemed. But the deeper question remains: if people with every advantage, education, opportunity, money, connections, can still choose murder,
July 1999. Nestled in the rolling hills of California is the scenic town of Happy Valley. Its peaceful tranquility, a far cry from events rocking the rest of the nation. Racial violence is exploding across the United States.
Well, I tell you, I don't have match, but I certainly don't have water.
Random acts directed against innocent people for nothing more than the color of their skin, their religious beliefs, or their sexual preference. July 1st, Happy Valley. two shadowy figures approached the isolated country home of Gary Mattson and Winfield Motor.
It was a real eye-opening experience for the entire community to think that something like this horrendous crime can be committed in our very midst.
A vicious crime.
I think that the potential for extreme violence is an inherent with most of these groups.
A deadly plan.
I think this was all part of some kind of a master plot or scheme.
Can police and forensic science stop the rampage before California ignites in a summer of hate?
You might be owed $85,000 for your accident like I was, and not even know it. Meanwhile, I was out here getting crumbs. $8,000. That's what my insurance offered me. That's like 3 vet visits and a bag of peanuts. Neck brace, stitches, dignity gone, and they still lowballed me. Adorable and insulted.
30 seconds. Filled out the form, blinked twice. Qualified. Felt like I unlocked cheat codes.
Case Connect AI.
July 2nd, 1999. Roger Mattson arrives at his brother's home. Gary has failed to show up for work at the local agricultural department in Redding, California. It's totally out of character. Concerned, Roger decides to check that everything is all right.
Gary, Winfield. Gary, Winfield, you guys home?
Hello.
He looked and he could see the bodies in their loft bed. Gary Mattson and Winfield Mauter were essentially executed in their bed in the middle of the night. They were shot several times. Ultimately, I think 15 shell casings were found at the scene. And of those 15 shots, we had 14, I believe, shots to the head area of the two men combined, to include, particularly on Mr. Mauter, a quarter-sized pattern on the back of his head of 3 or 4 rounds. Obviously a very brutal murder.
There wasn't anything really out of ordinary with the residence itself. No signs of forced entry, either on the front door or the back door. Once inside, the home didn't appear to be ransacked like it had been burglarized. There were in the living room several .22 caliber casings on the floor. The location of the casings found gave us a proximity of where we felt the shooter was standing at the time, from a distance of 10 to 15 feet from the loft bed. There was one shot sustained to Gary that was to the back, which had to have been done from a different location than the initial 14 rounds that were fired initially. One would have to walk around to the side of the bed, climb up a ladder that was used to get into the bed, and from that location, shoot Gary one time in the back. The amount of times that they were shot just told us that this individual or individuals that were responsible were there to ensure that they were dead.
Sicario.
Well, I think it was a real eye-opening experience for the entire community to think that something like this horrendous crime could be committed in our very midst against two people who were really well-known and well-respected members of our community.
Gary is very active in the community. He helped found the Carter House Museum. Winfield Mauder worked at a local home and garden store, both well-respected horticulturists. So they shared, a common interest. Had been partners for about 14 years. The community loved him.
Another recent murder in the area causes police to wonder if the cases are connected.
An elderly gentleman had been shot in bed, probably within 3 to 4 miles from the Matson Mauder residence.
So obviously, the thought was perhaps these two things are connected, and that was something that we looked at.
A second possible theory is that Gary Madsen and Winfield Mauder's killers were burglars.
We started discovering small items that had been taken, such as the victim's wallet was not accounted for. One of the victim's car was missing from the front of the residence. Somebody get out there in some mode of transportation, and then now we knew of a car that was taken. So we were thinking possibly a minimum of 2 people being involved.
The dead man's answering machine provides police with their first solid clue.
And the message on that machine had been changed.
Winfield and I came down this afternoon. We're pretty sick and we're going to the Bay Area to see a specialist.
And it was clearly not Mr. Madsen and Mr. Mauder on the machine.
That was dumb.
Knowing that it could be the key to identifying the killers, the tape is sent to an FBI lab for enhancement.
Obviously, we had a murder, and we had some evidence in terms of the shell casings that were found, the answering machine tape, the fact that the victim's car was missing. But quite frankly, for that first week, we really didn't have a lot to go on.
What investigators couldn't possibly know is that their murder investigation is part of something much larger and deadlier. July 1st, 1999. Gary Madsen and Winfield Mauder are murdered in Redding, California. But the killing of the gay couple is overshadowed by another crime. Exactly 2 weeks earlier, 2 hours to the south, the city of Sacramento had been rocked by a series of arsons.
In the early morning hours of June 18th, 1999, law enforcement and emergency services were notified of 3 synagogues that were on fire in the Sacramento area. Based on the inherent nature of 3 Jewish facilities going up in flames, it was pretty obvious that this was a deliberate act.
Within 45 minutes, fire has decimated B'nai Israel Synagogue, Congregation Beth Shalom Synagogue, and Knesset Israel Torah Center. The well-planned arsons result in $3 million in damage.
My state was shock and disbelief. And when it's your synagogue, it's a communal sense of violation. The feelings are exacerbated.
I just got paid $62,000 for my car accident using nothing but this app on my phone. I don't know if you can see this clearly, but it's called the Free Case Evil Smart Quiz. And yep, this check is for $62,000 and I'm literally on my way to cash it.
If you've never heard of Free Case Evals, it's quickly becoming one of the...
And then it was that terrible moment when we opened the ark and we had to take the Torahs out. And what was so humiliating was that here we were in our own synagogue, going into exile with our Torahs, like a metaphor for what the Jews have had to do throughout history as a result of anti-Semitism.
Well, we were quite obviously dealing with a hate crime. We had 3 arson attacks in one night in a very short period of time. The initial feeling is horror that such a crime like this would occur in Sacramento.
In the fire's aftermath, FBI investigators are joined by
A young woman headed home after a 4th of July party, but she never made it there. From the very first hours of the investigation, detectives began uncovering a series of troubling and downright bizarre clues. But none of them could have imagined the kind of horror they were about to face. And when the full truth finally came out, this case would go down as one of the most chilling in California's history. Megan Barroso was born on March 15, 1981, in the American town of Camarillo, California. When she was just a little kid, her parents split up, and she ended up living with her mom. But her dad stayed in the picture, seeing her regularly. As a child, Megan got into dancing, and it quickly became her absolute passion. During her high school years, her mom lost her job at the local hospital, forcing them to pack up and move to this small town called Templeton, about 3 hours away. It hit Megan hard. She had to leave behind her school and all of her friends. Right after graduating, she decided to head back closer to home. She rented a little apartment in a place called Moore Park, enrolled in the local community college, and landed a job as an assistant in the purchasing department at a clothing manufacturing company. Down the line, Megan planned to transfer to a university, but she hadn't decided what she wanted to study yet. She was excited to be spending time with her friends again. On top of that, her dad had just gotten remarried and had a newborn son, so Megan made it a point to drop by whenever she could. On July 4th, 2001, when she was 20, Megan had plans to spend the whole day with her friends. It was Independence Day, and fireworks were set to go off everywhere in celebration. She started by heading over to her friend Lindsay's house, where her family was throwing a barbecue. Everyone was having a great time, and as evening came, they got invited to a beach party in a nearby town. Megan left her car at Lindsay's place, and their friends came by to pick them up. The party itself was pretty chill. They hung out inside for a while, then headed down to the beach to watch the fireworks. A few hours later, they stopped by another friend's house, and around 2 a.m., they got dropped back off at Lindsay's. Lindsay offered to let Megan crash there for the night, since the drive back to her place would take a while. But Megan turned it down because she had to be up early for work the next morning. As Megan leaned in to hug Lindsay goodbye, she accidentally knocked her purse, and nearly everything spilled out onto the ground. They both crouched down to pick it all up, but in the mix, Megan accidentally grabbed Lindsay's phone. Neither of them noticed, and Megan hit the road. Just a few minutes later, Lindsay realized her phone was missing, and figured Megan must have grabbed it by accident. She called her own number from the house phone. Megan picked up, turned the car around, came back to drop it off, and then finally headed home for real.
I quit a 6-figure career to follow my God-given calling. I built a multi-million-dollar business that funds his work, and I have more freedom and flexibility for my family.
4 a.m., a security guard was patrolling one of the streets in Moore Park, keeping an eye on the local business. At some point, he heard these popping sounds coming from a nearby street and figured someone was setting off fireworks over there. He headed that way, and soon enough, he spotted an abandoned car right in the middle of the road. The car was sitting partly on the median, engine still running, driver's door wide open. The headlights and wipers were both on, but there was no sign of the driver anywhere. At first, the security guard figured maybe some drunk partier from the holiday had crashed and just taken off. But then, he noticed a woman's flip-flop on the asphalt, and the other one was tucked under the driver's seat. That struck him as weird. Would a woman really ditch the scene of an accident without her shoes? He stepped closer, peered inside the car, and saw red stains everywhere. Realizing it was blood, he quickly stepped back and called the police. The officers started examining the car and spotted a few bullet holes. Most were riddled across the windshield, and the driver's side window was completely shattered. With all that blood inside the cabin, At least one of those bullets had to have hit the driver, but the cops immediately picked up on something weird. There wasn't a single drop of blood outside the car. If she'd gotten out on her own, blood would have definitely spilled onto the pavement. So they figured the shooter might have grabbed the woman who was in there and taken her with them. On the left side of the car, the officers noticed some deep scratches, like another vehicle had sideswiped it. Right by the driver's seat was a purse, splattered with blood. There were no documents or ID inside, but tucked underneath the seat where the purse had been sitting, they found a cell phone, also smeared with blood. While the forensics team combed through the car itself, the police scoured the area for any leads, and it didn't take long to find a few shell casings. Experts quickly determined they came from an AK-47 assault rifle. All of this painted a pretty grim picture for the police. According to the investigators, the woman behind the wheel had probably stopped at a traffic light when the perp pulled up next to her. He rammed her car, and she tried to speed away from him, but the guy pulled out an assault rifle and unloaded on her vehicle. It looked like one or more bullets hit her, causing her to lose control and veer onto the median. What happened next was still a total mystery, but the detectives figured the attacker might have grabbed her and hauled her off in his own car. They also realized her wounds probably weren't fatal, given the relatively small amount of blood in the cabin. While investigators were piecing everything together, the cops ran the plates and discovered the car was a rental. They contacted the company, and that's when they learned it had been rented by Megan. The detectives called around to every hospital in the area, but she hadn't shown up at any of them. That only made their theory about her being kidnapped even stronger, but they still had zero leads to point them in the right direction. There were no foreign fingerprints in the car, no surveillance cameras on the road, and at the time it all went down, not a single witness drove by. The detectives headed out to speak with Megan's friends and family. Everyone told them the same thing. They had no clue who could have wanted to hurt her. She wasn't the type to get into fights with anyone. She didn't have a boyfriend or any messy exes. And honestly, she'd never made any enemies in her life. The cops also spoke with Lindsay, who filled them in on everything that happened that day. According to her, she and Megan had a great time. Nothing weird or out of the ordinary happened at all. The only thing that really stuck out to her was this guy named John, whose house by the beach was hosting the party. Lindsay knew him, but it was Megan's first time meeting him. Throughout the night, John kept coming up to Lindsay, asking her to introduce him to Megan, but she kept shutting him down. She told him Megan wasn't the kind of girl who'd be into a quick fling, and that was exactly what John was after. The police questioned him, but the guy swore he never left the party, and everyone there backed him up, saying he was at the house until the early morning. So investigators crossed him off their list and shifted focus back to finding Megan. Police brought in search dogs to check the car, but they only followed her scent a few yards before stopping cold, as if it just disappeared right there. That only fueled detectives' theory that some unknown attacker had grabbed Megan, tossed her into his car, and taken off. Even with all that, police still launched a search around the area where the car was found. Officers hit the streets, combed through the nearby mountains, and checked along the banks of a small river. They even brought in helicopters with infrared sensors to scan from above, but none of it turned up a single lead. Meanwhile, the detectives discovered that Megan's car had this device, kind of like a black box, which logged everything that happened with the vehicle. The cops dove into that data and also brought in ballistic experts to map out the trajectories of all the bullets based on the holes in the car. Putting it all together, they came up with a clearer picture of what happened with Megan. Someone sideswiped her car on the driver's side, and she floored the gas pedal to get away.
That's right.
It seemed like the attacker sped ahead and disappeared out of sight, because Megan ended up stopping at a traffic light. Maybe she figured the guy was long gone, but apparently he was lying in wait just up ahead, not far from that light. When she pulled to a stop, he started firing at her car. From what the ballistic experts said, those initial shots missed her, so she hit the gas again. But as Megan drove past the shooter, he fired one more time, and that bullet hit her in the stomach. That's when she lost control and veered onto the median. After that, Megan reached for her phone, which was in her purse. That's what the blood traces suggested. But right then, the attacker walked up to her car, and whatever happened next remained a total mystery.
Pop quiz for anyone who's been in a car accident. True or false? Most cases end up settling anyway, so you should accept the insurance company's first offer. No, false. Here's what usually happens when you get in a car accident that's not your fault. You'll get a payout offer from the insurance.
As soon as the details of what happened hit the media, this case blew up as one of the biggest topics in the whole county. People were terrified that some unknown psycho was out there blasting cars with an assault rifle, and they were demanding the police catch him immediately. Officers set up roadblocks to question as many drivers as possible. They were hoping to track down at least one person who'd driven through that morning. But all they found were a handful of folks who'd spotted Megan's car abandoned in the middle of the road. All of them just assumed some drunk had crashed and then ditched the scene. So none of these people bothered calling the cops. The detectives also launched a tip hotline, which got flooded with a few hundred calls. Most led straight to dead ends. But pretty soon, the police got this pretty bizarre lead. An anonymous caller tipped them off, saying that on the morning of July 5th, he'd seen some guy stuffing what looked like Megan's body into the trunk of a burgundy sedan. Moreover, it all went down near these mountains with a seriously bad reputation, where bodies turned up way too often. The detectives rushed out to search that spot right away, and they even released information about the burgundy sedan, hoping to find more witnesses. But in the end, it all came up empty. In the days that followed, investigators hit a total wall. They were starting to seriously doubt they'd ever find Megan alive. Still, they didn't let up. They poured everything they had into the case, chasing down every possible lead. With nothing solid to go on, police went back to Megan's closest friends and family, digging deeper to see if any suspect might have been hiding in plain sight. They even brought in handwriting experts to analyze her work documents, looking for any signs that she might have been stressed or anxious in the days leading up to her disappearance. Even with the dead ends piling up, the cops kept pushing forward with the search, and at one point, they stumbled across a human skull up in the mountains. Experts jumped on it and quickly figured out it belonged to a man who'd vanished the year before. A few weeks after Megan went missing, the police put out a $25,000 reward for information. And later, they rolled out a website dedicated to the case, complete with details and a form for submitting tips. A little while later, investigators brought in a well-known profiler named Sharon Hagen. She'd later go on to help create the movie Zodiac and several true crime shows about killers. After digging through every detail of the case, she concluded that the perpetrator most likely had a sexual motive. But the detectives didn't agree with it. They were convinced it was some kind of road rage incident that just spiraled out of control. Sharon, though, was positive the guy had kidnapped Megan to sexually assault her. What's more, she believed this wasn't his first time pulling something like this, and she even dug up a few other cases that could tie back to the same criminal. 2 years before this all went down, a woman named Joanna was just chilling in her bed when a man in a mask, armed with a knife, burst into her room. He claimed he was a cop and ordered her to strip down completely. Then he grabbed her car keys, shoved her into the passenger seat, and drove her to a park where a blanket was already spread out on the grass. There, he assaulted her, and afterward, he just drove the poor woman back home like nothing happened.